Hi, my name is Anesa Cortez, and this is my presentation from a research project. To begin, what are freak shows? Freak shows were a form of entertainment in which minorities such as people of color, indigenous people, and people with disabilities were exploited for profit and entertainment. It was called freak shows because these minorities were often called and portrayed as such. For instance, the Google definition, a person, animal, or plant with an unusual physical abnormality, categorizes these people as other. More specifically, it implies that if a person has a physical abnormality, then they are considered freaks rather than human. And that is exactly how they were perceived in these freak shows. If anything, they were thought to be more monstrous than they were human. Two of the many people in these freak shows were the Siamese twins. As presented in the image below, we can see that they were conjoined twins, and thus from this abnormality, they were dehumanized and commodified through freak shows. Well, now who is P.T. Barnum? Born in 1810, P.T. Barnum was a showman who gained his reputation from exploiting and commodifying minorities, one of which was Joyce Heth. She was a slave he bought, who was advertised as a 161-year-old woman who helped raise George Washington, but of course, this was just an act. Eventually, during the time in which Barnum would showcase her or display her, she became ill due to the amount of hours she was working, causing her to pass away. Barnum, being the exploiter he was, couldn't pass up the opportunity to further capitalize her. As a result, he made her autopsy open to the public, with a 50-cent fee, demonstrating that he had no respect for her whatsoever. Now, on this slide are three quotes from some of my secondary sources, and these quotes help us understand Barnum's character, or who Barnum was. The first quote is from Barnum's autobiography. In this quote, the author, Werner, is discussing Barnum's exploitation of Heth. He states, "She must be regarded as one of the most interesting of Barnum's ventures, not only because she was the first of her kind, but because of his unique exploitation of her repulsive qualities." From this quote, it becomes evident that Barnum did in fact exploit Heth due to her physical qualities that made her vulnerable, such as her age and race. And these qualities made her vulnerable because of slavery, which will be explored more in depth in the next quote. The second quote is from an article that discusses Barnum's exploitation of Americans' mindsets upon Africans and African Americans. In this quote, the author, Lynn Forrest, states, "Africa, even after centuries of slave trade, remained a remote and unusual part of the world in the minds of most Americans in Barnum's day. Africans were therefore perfectly suited to Barnum's purposes because they were mysterious, unknown, and could be represented in ambiguous fashion." From this quote, it becomes evident that Barnum knew how Africans and African Americans were perceived at the time of slavery, causing him to further enableize his prejudice by exploiting Heth. Furthermore, he didn't care if he was harming the African community, but rather he only cared about capitalizing them. Lastly, the third quote is from Charles Stratton's autobiography. Charles was one of the people Barnum exploited and capitalized by displaying him in his museum. In this quote, the author, Lehman, states, "Barnum already knew that physical oddities could sell tickets for the New York Museum he had recently purchased, and that giants and dwarves, who were otherwise suitably proportioned, were amongst the biggest draws." This quote further demonstrates that Barnum had a habit of enabling Americans' prejudiced mindsets of minorities within their 18th to 19th century society. Now that we know what freak shows were and who P.T. Barnum was, what is The Greatest Showman? The Greatest Showman is a movie produced by 20th Century Fox in 2017. It is a film that is said to be based off of P.T. Barnum's life. In this film, the audience follows Barnum as a child and into adulthood, as he tries to obtain his dream of becoming a showman. In the process, with the help of the outcasts of his society, the film portrays Barnum as an empathetic man and someone who learns from his mistakes. However, this contradicts the historical scholarly conversation of Barnum that is developed in a way that portrays him as an exploitive man, as seen with the quotes on the previous slide. Additionally, The use of people with disabilities to falsely portray Barnum's character is ableism, favoritism of non disabled people. This is another scholarly conversation that focuses primarily on film analysis and disability studies. In this scholarly conversation, the topic of how media uses ableism and how harmful it is to the disabled community is explored. Therefore, my thesis is that this paper and project will attempt to add and conjoin both scholarly conversations by analyzing Barnum's history of exploiting outcasts in his late 18th to early 19th century society and his portrayal in the film. Through this analysis, it becomes clear that the film falsely characterizes P.T. Barnum as an empathetic man to sell the film's message as one of inclusion while also harming the disabled community by enabling stereotypes and prejudice in the process. Now, how does the film falsely portray him? Firstly, we see it in the scenes in which Barnum is attempting to recruit outcasts for his show. The first clip I will be presenting is the scene in which Barnum is attempting to recruit Charles Stratton.
I am putting together a show, and I need a star.
You want people to laugh at me?
Well, they're laughing anyway, kid, so might as well get paid. I see a soldier, no, a general, riding across the stage with a sword and a gun and the most beautiful uniform ever made. People will come from all over the world, and when they see him, they won't laugh. They'll salute.
As we can see through this scene, Barnum getting on his knee creates linear perspective between him and Charles. This effect creates an equal ground between the two, showing the lack of power dynamic between them, presenting them as equals. It also emphasizes the notion that Barnum respects him. This is further emphasized within their dialogue, when Barnum says that the audience won't be laughing, but rather they will be saluting. This presents a promise that Barnum is making with Charles that he will help society understand and respect him. In the next scene, Barnum is seen attempting to recruit a woman named Letty Lutz.
Oh,
Sir, you shouldn't be here.
I'm sorry. Who's doing this singing? It's you, isn't it?
Sir, I have to ask you to leave.
You are so talented, blessed, extraordinary, unique. I would even say beautiful.
Sir, please leave me alone.
They don't understand, but they will.
The mise en scène in this scene displays a towel that is used to hide Letty's face from him. When he pulls it away, his reaction isn't disgust, but instead fascination. This reaction differentiates him from their society because any abnormality is seen as freakish. Additionally, the use of dialogue demonstrates that he isn't discouraged to hire her despite her abnormality. This is shown when her coworkers laugh at Barnum's remark of her being beautiful, to which he responds that they don't understand, but that they will. This shows that his intentions aren't similar to the intentions he has with Charles, which is to help society understand them. Secondly, the film further falsely characterizes Barnum through altering his life events. The first one is with his supposed affair with singer Jenny Lind. Lind was a singer that he recruited and helped expand her career by making her well known within the United States. As he travels on tour with her, she confesses her feelings for him and says she wants him to follow her through the entirety of the tour. However, considering that he is married and has the show to take care of, he doesn't. This causes her to kiss him in front of the audience of her show and to quit the tour. Eventually, the news of their kiss spreads, affecting his marriage significantly. In comparison to Barnum's life, he did in fact work with a singer named Jenny Lind. However, they didn't get along. But they continued to work together because they made a lot of money when they did. The second event is when Barnum returns to his museum after leaving the tour. When he returns, he finds his museum up in flames due to a fight that broke loose between protesters of his museum and the people within his show. This shows that Barnum was beginning to slowly lose everything: his marriage, and now his dream. In comparison to his real life, Barnum's museum did in fact burn down, but the cause was unknown. The fact that they incorporated the fight between the people within the show and protesters also contributes to influencing the audience to sympathize them. Thirdly, in a scene in which Barnum is keeping his attention on trying to recruit Jenny Lind and pushes the people within his show away, a song, This Is Me, comes on to present their self empowerment. The song says the following lyrics: "When the sharpest words want to cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood, gonna drown 'em out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be." Through the use of hyperbole, such as of words being sharp and sending a flood, their sense of empowerment are presented. They are no longer ashamed of themselves. Instead, they accept themselves and embrace it through this song. This also influences the audience to identify with them, to the extent in which a TikTok trend was created with the song. In the trend, outcasts within our own 21st century society, such as queer people, people of color, and people with disabilities, would participate in this trend. Here is one of the many TikToks made to the trend.
I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I'll make no apologies. This is me. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a bird, gonna drown mine. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me. This is me.
This shows the impact the song from the movie has had on people, allowing them to embrace their own self acceptance and empowerment. Additionally, the comments on the right are comments under the song's music video, further showing the impact the song has had on people's lives. Lastly, by the end of the movie, after Barnum has lost his marriage and museum, he reunites with the people within his show. He is presented crying when a song, From Now On, comes on. In this song, the following lyrics are said: "If all was lost, there's more I gained, 'cause it led me back to you. From now on, these lights will not be blinded by the lights." These lyrics demonstrate Barnum holding himself accountable, which isn't seen within the historical scholarly conversation. Therefore, this shows that the people within his show helped bring Barnum to this point of the film, presenting him as an empathetic man who learns from his mistakes. Now, the use of people with disabilities to falsely portray an exploitive man as a good man is ableism, discrimination in favor of abled people. As one of my secondary sources that engage in disability studies states, still, even when the handicapped character is presented sympathetically as a victim of bigotry, it remains clear that severe disability makes social integration impossible. While viewers are urged to pity such character, we are left off the hook by being shown that disability or bias or both must forever ostracize severely disabled persons from society. This shows that if people with disability don't fulfill the stereotypes that society has created for them, they are faced with discrimination. The enabling of stereotypes is presented in the film through two occurrences. First, when Barnum leaves the museum, a fight breaks loose, causing him to lose the museum. This shows that the people within his show aren't safe when he isn't with them, emphasizing the idea that people with disabilities have to depend on others for safety. Second, the actor that played Charles Stratton, Sam Humphrey, wasn't the appropriate height to play Charles. However, instead of hiring an actor with the appropriate height, they made Humphrey walk on his knees and use CGI to make him appear shorter. This emphasizes ableism because they didn't hire an appropriate actor for the role. Now, Why is this important? This is important because, as we've seen from the film, it creates stereotypes, which further causes prejudice and discrimination. To further present how harmful it is to the disabled community, here is a quote from one of my secondary sources. Theories of ambivalent prejudice predict that when disabled people are assumed to be incompetent but warm, they are also targets of disrespectful, condescending attitudes and infantilizing actions. In other words, if disabled people don't conform to these stereotypes, they are forced with even more discrimination. Additionally, people with disabilities tend to have lower employment rates than abled people, causing them to have higher homeless rates. This correlates with what I mentioned about the casting director not hiring an appropriate person for the role. It is things like this that can impact the disabled community greatly. Now, this doesn't mean that the film's ability to help the audience identify and feel self empowered is a bad thing. It is obviously a good thing. However, it is important to hold the film accountable and other films similar to it, or else stereotypes of the disabled community will continue to be enabled, continuing to harm them in impactful ways. And that concludes my presentation.